Alright, so welcome to your very quick math tutorial on rearranging equations, or we could say rearranging formulas, since equations and formulas both mean the same thing, and in particular we're going to be looking at how to rearrange an equation on just the one side, and also swapping equations. Now this is a very easy concept to grasp, and so we're only going to need one example. So let's say we had the equation, we had the equation 2a divided by 5 equals 1. Now, we could decide to only rearrange the equation on the left-hand side. There's nothing really much to arrange on the right-hand side of this equation, since we only have one constant term. So we could rearrange the equation on the left-hand side. So dealing with this expression on the left-hand side, we know that 2a equals a plus a. So we could write it like this: a plus a divided by 5 equals 1. And so both of these equations, equation 1 and 2, are both considered equivalent equations. They've just been rearranged on the left hand side. So we could decide to break this algebraic fraction down even further into its component parts, and we could say a divided by 5 plus a divided by 5 equals 1. And so now all three of these equations are actually said to be equivalent equations. They're all the same equation. It's just the expression on the left hand side has been slightly rewritten or rearranged, whatever you want to prefer to call it. And so you don't just want to take my word for it. You would want to test to make sure that all of these equations are equivalent. Now it just so happens that I've found the solution of these equations prior hand, and it just turns out that a equals 5 over 2. And so what we could do to find out if all of these equations are equivalent is to plug in our value for a and to find out and see if a satisfies all three of these equations. If a satisfies all three of these equations, then they're said to be equivalent. So let's begin. So if a equals 5 over 2, we're going to plug that into our first equation. So we have 2 times 5 over 2, we'll write it like this actually, 5 over 2 divided by 5 equals 1. Now we know that 2 times 5 over 2 equals 5, and so we have 5 over 5 equals 1, and so we know that this value of a is the correct solution to our first equation. So how about our second equation? So what do we have here? We have a plus a, which is 5 over 2 plus 5 over 2 divided by 5. Now 5 over 2 plus 5 over 2 is 10 over 2. So we have 10 over 2 divided by 5. We know that 10 over 2 is 5. And so again we have our 5 over 5 equals 1. So we know that equation 1 and 2 are both equivalent equations. Let me just delete this. So now what about our third equation? So we have a over 5 plus a over 5 equals 1. So we know that a equals 5 over 2. So what we have is we have 5 over 2, put it in brackets, divided by 5 plus 5 over 2 divided by 5 equals, and since both of our denominators are the same, we can simply just add the numerators. So again what we have is 5 over 2 plus 5 over 2. Now we know that 5 over 2 plus 5 over 2 is 10 over 2, and so that will be divided by 5, and so again we have 5 over 5 equals 1. And so all of these equations are said to be equivalent equations. So the second thing we want to look at is swapping sides, and that's even more simple. So I'll just delete all this again. So we want to swap sides, and so essentially what we want to do is we want to make the left hand side the right hand side and the right hand side the left hand side. So we literally have this, we have in our first case, in our first equation, we have 1 equals 2a over 5. There we swap the sides. Here we can have 1 equals a plus a over 5. And there again we swap sides. And here we have 1 equals a over 5 plus a over 5. And we've again swapped our sides.